I never gave the movie any thought. I never thought it would be made, with very good reason. You know, who's gonna make something called Hellboy?
Let's just get something out of the way. I fucking love Hellboy. I have read almost every comic. I try to collect every collectible I can find. I have met Mike Mignola and he signed an issue of mine. I got a freaking tattoo of the right hand of Doom, and I even made a video on how Hellboy is essentially a modern mythological figure, which you should watch if you haven't. And as someone who's an enormous fan of Hellboy, it is very safe to say that I crave me a ton of the character. However, while Marvel and DC are celebrating the huge number of content outside of the comic medium with the films and games, me and my fellow Hellboy fans are just sitting in the corner depressed about the lack of Hellboy content outside of the comic medium. I mean, Netflix has made a deal with Dark Horse, the company who distributes Hellboy, to make some shows based off of their properties, so maybe there is potential for a Hellboy show or film. Please let it be Jenna D. Tartakovsky. Please let it be Jenna D. Tartakovsky. While contemplating on the future of the character, I believe it is important to look back to the very beginning, and that would be Hellboy Asylum Seeker on the PS1. Nah, just kidding. It's Hellboy released in 2004, directed by God and starring Chad. The film is an origin story which loosely adapts the very first Hellboy arc, Seed of Destruction, and follows a half-demon paranormal investigator who gets discovered in 1944 by US soldiers and a paranormal investigator named Professor Broom. Guillermo del Toro has created legendary films like Pan's Labyrinth and The Shape of Water, but there is something I really do appreciate about the two Hellboy films he's directed that I hold dear to my heart, and that is the passion and creativity involved. A lot of people I know say that the Hellboy films aren't exactly accurate to the comics, and they would be right. Hellboy and Liz have a romance. Hellboy's a secret from the world instead of an actual paranormal investigator.
Hellboy. He's real.
He acts like a teenager instead of a grown-ass man.
She took his picture. She took his picture.
Abe Sapien acts more like C-3PO instead of his comic counterpart, and has psychic powers. Most of the film takes place in a city instead of ancient ruins. Alright, before I go off on a rant about why people should read Hellboy, the point I'm trying to make is this. Yes, it is not exactly accurate to the source material. That doesn't mean it has no respect or love for the comic. In fact, the complete opposite.
I didn't want to do a carbon copy of anything. The movie is its own creature. The movie is not the comic.
It's almost like Guillermo del Toro and his crew are writing a fan letter to Mike Mignola about why they love Hellboy so much through this film. So before I go into a 6-month hibernation again, I'm going to explain why this film was a fan letter to Mike Mignola.
When we met and we talked about it, it was very clear to me that this was probably the only guy who could make the movie.
Before diving into why this film feels like a fan letter, I should talk about Del Toro's love for the comic. Actually, instead of explaining Guillermo del Toro's love for Hellboy, I believe it would be best just to show it.
This is where Hellboy comes from. That's where Hellboy comes from.
Thought it was visually so rich and so powerful, and I wanted to try and translate some of the characters and the images to film.
Can I have one?
Yeah, I've got a pile of
I have one in Austin, but it's not enough.
I am a big fan of Mike. To this day, he's one of my heroes.
Yeah, it is pretty safe to say that Guillermo del Toro fucking loves Hellboy as well. What makes this film work so well can already be seen in the clips of Del Toro geeking out, and it is also very clear that Del Toro perfectly understands the character as well.
Even although Hellboy is 6'5", bright red, has horns and a tail and all that, he's a regular Joe. He's a blue-collar, hard-working guy.
It also helps that Guillermo del Toro has a huge love for monsters, and the attention to detail he puts into the worlds he has created, which is shown in his past films Chronos, The Devil's Backbone, and Blade 2. This ranges from special effects, production design, and the script. Lastly, he was given a very big responsibility to bring Hellboy to the big screen for the very first time, and he knew the solution was to bring his own personality to the film while also paying respect to the source material in necessary ways that don't distract the film from the story and characters, which one film fucked up on. It's a nice balance between the comic book medium and the film medium. When it comes to that attention to detail, it is noticed in scenes where Rasputin is only wearing one gauntlet to parallel Hellboy, and how Samael is asymmetrical to parallel, again, Hellboy. The point I am trying to make is that Guillermo del Toro's attention to detail clearly comes from his passion not only as a filmmaker, but as a comic book fan as well. And I'm pretty sure Del Toro crying at a sculpture of Abe Sapien helps my argument due to the fact that Del Toro's favorite character is Abe Sapien. So let's get into the film itself. In what ways does it pay tribute to the source material? Well, for starters, I suppose it is very appropriate to talk about the references themselves.
I hate those comic books.
Now remember when I said that this film isn't 100% accurate to the source material? Well, there is something, or rather somebody, who is, and that's HB himself, played by Ron Perlman. And he doesn't just play Hellboy, he is Hellboy.
I'm fireproof. You're not.
Even though I mentioned that Hellboy acts like a teenager more than an adult, like in the comics, it's all the subtlety and the nuance that Ron Perlman brings to the role that really transforms him into the character. He nails everything from his nonchalant attitude.
What do you say we work this out in a nice, peaceful... Oh, crap.
His voice.
Hey. They're playing our song. Come on, champ. Let's go fight some monsters.
Regarding the other comic book references, there are a ton of Easter eggs in this film that just made me geek out. There was Roger in the background, the photograph from 1944, Mike Mignola himself making a cameo as a knight alongside Del Toro as a dinosaur, Mike Mignola drawing an in-film issue, Hellboy doing that cool punch while jumping, and a ton of lines that I'll play right now.
That's it for you, Sam.
Pestilence, seed of destruction.
Cut to the end, will you? That voice.
It was
Just what was it that landed you this job pushing pancakes, huh?
Kill my father. Your ass is mine.
You will never fulfill your destiny. You will never understand the power inside you.
I'll just have to find a way to live with that.
Lastly, and probably the most popular Easter egg in the film, is Ivan the Corpse, which is a reference to the short story, well, The Corpse. I cannot explain enough how awesome this Easter egg is, not just because it's a reference, but how it was incorporated into the film. They put blood, sweat, and tears into Ivan to make sure he looked fully alive with animatronics, and it looks better than most digital effects today.
Go to the gravestone. There you will find sanctuary.
And it is because this effort comes from passion, and that passion comes from filmmakers who are enormous fans of the comics. Another element I notice as well is the high contrast in the lighting and the vibrant use of red on Hellboy. There is a very good use of shadows with Hellboy's eyes that looks like it's been ripped straight out of a comic book. The way the lighting is used and the red makeup on Hellboy makes him really stand out from the rest of the characters, and again, this is something that is a big element of the graphic novels. Also, in the scenes where it does take place in ruins, it looks incredible, which is like only in the third act. But the sets, the lighting, just the whole scene overall makes me feel like I am reading a comic book, and I really adore it.
What is it that makes a man a man? Is it his origins, the way things start? Or is it something else, something harder to describe?
Something that is super important for a comic book film is to have a ton of heart and passion behind it. This is something that is seen in the characters of the film like Hellboy, Liz, and Abe Sapien. Yeah, they're not exactly accurate to the source material, but in some sense, they're still broken people trying to make their way in life with a situation of monster hunting, which they have no choice but to take part in because they have nowhere else to go, which is a very big part in the comics. Furthermore, they understand that they need to take care of each other, which Abe Sapien mentions to Liz.
All us freaks have is each other.
This is what was fundamentally important for the film to get right, and they did it very well. The three characters trying to make a life for themselves is something that gets developed more in the sequel, which I'll talk about for another time. Lastly, it is time to talk about the meats and bones of this film, and that would be the meaning. Something that really resonated with me about the comics was how it was about a character staying true to himself. Hellboy constantly gets told by his enemies that he is supposed to be the destroyer of the world. During the entire run, he struggles with who he's supposed to be as an individual while making indecisions and running away from the truth. But in the end, he realizes that running away just causes more pain for not only others around him, case in point, Alice, but for himself as well. He figures out that the only way he can stay true to himself is to accept the bigger picture of who he is, just so as long as he doesn't give in to that evil. This is something I go a little bit more in depth with on my previous video about the mythology of Hellboy, but in short, Hellboy is about self-acceptance and that individual making choices while staying true to himself. I'm explaining this because this is something I resonate with, and it's one of the biggest reasons why I'm so passionate about Hellboy. It is also something Guillermo del Toro perfectly understands as well, alongside co-writer Peter Briggs. Every character in this film ultimately stays true to who they are. Here are a few examples. Even though Professor Broom knows that Hellboy is the beast of the apocalypse, he ultimately accepts himself as a father of a good man rather than being the cause of his son's destiny.
Call him son.
Lastly, I cannot talk about self-acceptance if I cannot bring up the big man himself. Hellboy struggles with himself as an individual throughout the film. He sees himself as a monster at times and not as a man. And while John Myers is arguably the worst character in the film due to poor characterization and poor acting,
okay, you saw the fish guy, right?
Oh yeah, that was weird.
His ultimate purpose is to show that the reason why Hellboy is jealous of him is because he wants to be like him.
I'm not like Myers. It makes you feel like you belong. Which is good, really.
He sees that Myers is a good man who happens to be normal, and this is something Hellboy desperately desires, and it is why he views himself so negatively.
I wish I could do something about this. I can't.
But every time he goes into the world, it is proven that he is not a monster, and Del Toro shows through subtle moments that he is a good man, and that what his destiny is doesn't matter because of his actions as an individual.
Red Bean, stop!
Thank you.
My job.
This is ultimately what is put up to the test in the end, and through choice and human will, something his father taught him, Hellboy chooses to accept himself as a good man. If the filmmakers didn't understand the character at all, then this meaning wouldn't have been included at all. Everything I've talked about, from the passion, the references, and ultimately the meaning itself, is why Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy is a fan letter to Mike Mignola.